Hello, everyone. Here is Henriette Dybkjær from MDC, the Maritime Development Center. This is one of the last tidbits we are having before having our summer holidays, which will be until August 18th, and we will be back again. But we have been inspired by the Danish television, so we will be doing a lot of replays of all the past tidbits. So you won't miss us. So you won't be able to miss your tidbit for lunch, even though we are having summer holidays. But on August 18th, we will be back at 12 o'clock for your lunch. So let me share your lunch with you. Today, I'm having a nice ball of pineapple. And we are also going to have a wonderful toast for today's tidbit. Because today I have Daria Krivonos in the studio, in the tidbit studio. Daria, she is currently the CEO of Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. She's a hardcore analyst and a really, really good speaker. So I have good expectations to her performance today. And what makes her very relevant to this maritime audience at Tidbits is that before taking over the position at the Institute for Future Studies, she used to be the boss for enterprise risk at Maersk. So she knows a lot about the maritime business. So if you have any questions about that, don't hesitate to combine what you are listening to today with the maritime perspective, because I'm sure she will be able to connect the stuff. So let's get started. Daria, the floor is yours, and enjoy your lunch.
Thank you, Henriette, and thank you for having me. And cheers. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how to plan in times of uncertainty, and I would argue that during my medium-length career so far, so I spent 10 years with Maersk, and I've been at the Institute for 2 years, I would believe that across the financial crisis, the Occupy Wall Street, etc., and some of the crises we've had over the last 15 years, this may be the biggest and the widest and the deepest. So I think this is a time where a lot of things are actually uncertain. So without further ado, I will just take you through how we work with uncertainties and looking into the future at the Institute. My slides, please. All right, there we go. So just very quickly, I mean, the Institute is 50 years old, and I'm an economist by training. So for me, 50 years old implies that we must at least have been less wrong than the average for at least 50 years in order to work with something that is so easily proven wrong as the future transpires, and looking into the future as we do here, which means that we've somehow managed to at least pinpoint the right developments and some sort of plausible trajectories through time. Now, one of the reasons we've been able to do that is also because we don't actually forecast. Often people would come to me and say, well, you know, what does your crystal ball tell you about this? And what do you think about that? And what about the stock prices, etc.? So what we do here is that we look at these tectonic shifts in megatrends. We look at trends that are building underneath every economy, every society, and we see how they interact, how they collide, and what that means on a broader scale. So if we want to introduce the megatrends, we have 14. You can have 10, you can have 15. If you Google them, you're going to find almost the same ones, because these are megatrends. These are developments and trends which will be on the move for some 10, 15 years. We can hardly affect them, but they will absolutely affect everything we do and everything around us. So the 14 we work with are here. Given the short time I have, I will not get into all of them, but when we look at why do we have a pandemic, I mean, of course, there's the spurring of the virus, and that's the obvious one. But the reason it's gone from just a disease outbreak to becoming an epidemic and then a pandemic, which means it's gone global, is in particular we have three culprits. If we look within the megatrend universe, so of course, globalization, we travel, we trade, where the world is intertwined. I mean, God knows how much of the virus has traveled on an airplane and then spread locally where it arrived. Economic growth also means that we're closer connected worldwide. So the I mean, I think one simple example would be that in an increase in the middle class, and the growing middle class means that you simply have more travelers. The world is available to everybody. And then, of course, we have the demographic development, which means we live in bigger and bigger cities, we live closer, we interact much more. These are just some of the elements that can propel a local virus outbreak to becoming a global pandemic, locking down the world. Now, they're not they're not all bad. So a few of these, we also argue, have helped us weather the storm so far. So technological development, just the fact that I'm speaking to you on a platform, some of you, I suppose, from across the globe, means that technology has really offered some support in the way we work, the way we interact. The fact that knowledge society is now one of the megatrends we're looking at, that we don't go into a manufacturing facility, and many of us at least don't. Some, of course, still do, and thank God they do. But many of us work from the neck and up. We live in the knowledge society, which means combining that with technology, it allows us to continue to work. Then we have the network society trend, which means that the fact that the way that we've connected on Facebook and other platforms and offered our support to the communities that we live in, etc. I mean, the network society has really lifted a big burden off the governments in these days in helping manage some of the crisis outfalls. Democratization here is not intended as a political movement, but rather the fact that we all have access to many of these things. So technology has undergone democratization. We have access to the same apps, services, etc., which means that information, government strategies, etc., could actually penetrate the societies much faster. And at the same time, we have immaterialization, which means we're less and less connected to physical things, which again makes it easier. So be it the contactless payments, etc., that's just one example. But again, given the fact that the virus spreads through physical interaction with each other and with physical and tangible entities, then immaterialization has helped us weather the storm. The next question that, of course, is extremely relevant is what's going to happen next. So some megatrends have spurred the virus, or at least helped it along. Some megatrends have helped us weather the storm. And these are the 14. And the question is then, how do these perform, and what paths are these going to take going forward? And a few questions could be, again, are we going to see the end of cash? So is technology and the virus combined, is that going to take us into a completely cash-free world? Are we going to see a regionalization of supply chains? Again, this is a very relevant question to raise if you're working in supply chains and shipping, or just the maritime industry in general. So are we going to see a shift in the way we've done business and connected the world previously? Another one is, what about the polarization element? So as much as this may be a national issue, this could create political instability. This could deteriorate trust in nation states, in own governments, but also in global collaboration. And that, of course, would have an impact on globalization in turn. Sustainability. I think most businesses these days have a sustainability agenda. They either part of the Global Compact, or they have a CSR report, or someone who's responsible. So sustainability has been building a momentum for many, many years now, and seems to be making its way into the C-suite meeting rooms. And then suddenly we have a big economic crisis. We have high unemployment. So is sustainability going to lose steam and take a back seat in the wake of the crisis? What about surveillance and data? Are we going to share our data freely, opening up for the risk of surveillance? And how does that square with the democratic rule that we have? And of course, something like focus on health. So what's going to happen with the data that we share for our health services? Are we going to go from sick care to actual health care? Now, mind you, I think in many places it is called a healthcare sector, but yet we only interact with it when we're actually sick. So the irony is that it's actually sick care. And the question is, can we transition into healthcare? Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because when you work with megatrends and you look at all the things that are moving, it's extremely hard to sometimes dissect what's actually going to be the most important trend to you, or the most important development, or the biggest risk. And at times we simply give up because we simply exclaim that uncertainty is too large, which means we just stick to our plans and we take it as we go. But fact is, what we do here at the Institute is that we support companies or our clients and counterparts in boiling it down to the key uncertainties. So what are the givens that are now uncertain? What assumptions do we forget to revisit in our strategies? because we think that now we've assumed something and the world is just going to play ball and that's how things are going to pan out. But in reality, there are uncertainties and we have no control. Now, just an example from now. So if you are in global supply chains, what's going to happen to globalization? It could go either one of these two ways. And it's quite two distinct polarities, which would change the way we do business, the way we do manufacturing, the way we do investments, and absolutely the way we do shipping and logistics. Is it globalization 2.0? Are we going to go closer together and trade even more? Or are we going to go to regionalization and nearshoring? What about retail? Are we stepping into an online forever world, or are we going to go back to say, oh my God, I miss walking into a physical store? And this would change the world of retail significantly, whether we go to the one extreme or the other. What about European integration? So political stability, rule of law, institutions, how we do business, and of course the economic impact. How is the EU going to come out of this? Is it going to be make my country great again? Is it going to be populist uprise and trying to create jobs within the borders of every country at any cost? Are we going to look at a stronger together across the EU? And of course, the sustainability element that I already discussed. So we're going to look to fix the economy now, and then we can do climate some other time. Or are we going to see the first virtual COP meetings, the end of oil, and sustainability really accelerates after we've seen dolphins in Venice and the rest of it? Now, I guess these are just some examples, but what I want to try to do today is to help you or to force you to think about what are your key uncertainties, not drivers. Because if drivers are some of them, but then you take your driver and you look at it and you say, what do I believe about it? Are there polarities where it's actually a 50-50? And if so, is it something that's going to have a tremendous effect on me? Because if it is, then it is one of your key uncertainties, and you should try and address it in a resilient manner. You can do it by creating scenarios. That's what we do sometimes. So we do these 2 by 2. We pick 2 key uncertainties and we draw out different worlds. So here is, oil is back. Oil is the new black and it's back, or sustainable future now. That's 2 very different trajectories for the world, and they would transpire differently, whether it's a globalized regime or it's a regionalization and isolationism sentiment that we're seeing. Similarly, for retail, so an online forever retail, what does it mean for the Amazons? What does it mean for the Alibabas, etc.? What does it mean for those who fill the containers with these things that go global? Or is it online forever, national champions, regional champions? We're going to nearshore everything, and we don't need the triple E's, but rather the smaller vessels, etc. And then you can map out your risks and opportunities. So this is about creating plausible narratives and worlds within each and every one of these quadrants. When we look at the COVID-19, I think we read a lot about, is it going to be V recovery or U recovery? And we believe that the dialogue is a little bit sidetracked. So we keep looking at consequences and deeming them to be the key moving factors. And we think that's a misunderstanding, whether it's human nature, whether it's human nature that we grapple for control and we look for dynamics we somehow can relate to, the economy we can relate to, we can do something, we can fix it. Or it's just because that's what matters most to us, but we forget what is actually driving this crisis. And we believe that it's the virus. So it's the government response, it's the citizens' response to the government's response, it's the vaccine outlook, and of course, population density and healthcare systems. Now, the 2 bottom ones, we can't really do anything about in the short term. That leaves us with the upper 3. So this, for us, would be the critical uncertainties of the crisis we're in today. And collapsing the 2 first ones means that the government response and the effectiveness of same is a key driving force. Say, if you have the lockdown and it doesn't work because people don't adhere to it, they don't respect it, well, then you're going to have an overwhelmed healthcare system. You're going to have a force majeure. You may experience what happened in northern Italy and Ecuador, etc. So that's something that is going to handicap an economy and labor market and activity in society in general. At the same time, you can only expect people to be patient and obedient for some time. So what is the vaccine outlook? So we've created these 2 axes. So one of them is, to what extent are the mitigation strategies effective? And the other one is, will there be a vaccine? Oh, sorry, it should say 2022. So is there going to be a vaccine available over the next 2 years? And this gives us something like this. Now, in the upper left, we call it the furious effort and the fast recovery, which means that things are working. The government strategies are working. We're staying home. We're keeping our distance. We can slowly go back to normal, slow reopening. And then we only have to do this for a year and a half or less, hopefully, because there is a vaccine before 2022. Now, the double dip is we call it too loose, you lose, which means we open up too soon. We stop respecting the government strategies. Now, the sun is out in Copenhagen. We can already see the people moving closer. They're having a drink in the sun. So we're relaxing a little bit more, but the virus has not significantly changed, which means before the vaccine arrives, we may have a double dip. Now, in the other corner, we're looking at the painful and long stride because the vaccine is simply nowhere in sight, and that changes our dynamics significantly, even if we escape a state of emergency healthcare crisis. And then in the bottom, we do have the invisible enemy for a long time and a full disintegration. So we call this the nothing works. And if we were then to start talking about consequences, this is where you have your V recovery. This is where you have your W. This is where you have the U, and you have the L. We've often been asked about the axis so the horizontal axis, but I think it's extremely important to remember what it means to get a vaccine so fast. Now, on the left, we have, this is a depiction of the traditional and historic trajectories for creating vaccines. So we're talking about 14 to 16 year period, which would be the normal. We've just said vaccine so many times and discussed it in the media so much that we suddenly believe that it's something that is doable just within the next couple of months. Now, there's a certain leader across the Atlantic who also somehow supports this notion and has led us to have an illusion that this is something that's going to happen very soon. This is what the 2-year outlook looks like compared to that. So this is a historic feat if it does occur, if we do succeed. Now, there are many reasons why it could go be faster this time around, but let's not forget that this is unprecedented development. Now, why we've chosen the 2-year line is also to say that there must be, that's the approximate fatigue that we expect in a society, both in terms of trust, the willingness to share your data and apps, the willingness to support your government. We're going to have several elections in the meantime, etc. So we've set an arbitrary and yet not an arbitrary timeline, saying there's a difference between the 2022 and beyond timeline for a vaccine. And in that, we're, of course, all of these things happen in all of these 4 scenarios now. At some point, if you have an interest, I can share with you the full scenarios in detail, because in every one of them, we assume what's going to happen with politics. We assume what's going to happen in geopolitics, in the economy, in society, in technology, etc. So every one of these 4 worlds addresses these uncertainties and many, many more in far more detail, making sure that we're consistent across. So in a V recovery, we suspect that Trump could actually win, given the fact that he will have a lot of tailwind from a recovering economy, etc. In a W, the same. So in between the waves, we could see a Republican win for the presidential election again, and then after that, an isolationistic view. On the other side, we have the Democrats winning, but we're in it for the long run, and there is no vaccine, and the world may close in on itself, and a EU disintegration and breakup in the lower right corner. So when you work with uncertainties, it's extremely important to remember the polarities have to be plausible, yet they have to be polarities. They have to be a 50-50. You don't know. It could go either way, but it's a critical driver of your business. And I think the key words for me before I round off would be, don't mistake the likable for the likely. We as humans gravitate towards something we can imagine. Very few businesses, strategies, forecasts ever assume regression in any way, shape, or form. We hardly ever assume economic downturn. We hardly ever assume market share regression, etc. So we as humans forecast something that is upward sloping. At best, it's flat, and even then we get depressed. We have to be vigilant, and we have to be honest about the likely and the likable being 2 very different things, similar to preferable and probable. So probabilities are important, but if it's something you know for a fact is probable, then plan for it. But if you don't know which way it's going, if it is a business driver, make sure you look at it and look it in the eye and honestly admit to yourself that it's an uncertainty and you have to plan for it, and then try assume the polarities and create the world around it. So I think this is a very, very brief introduction to what scenario planning, what uncertainties are, and how you can go about it even in a COVID environment, and what the world may look like on the other side. So what drives your businesses, and what way do you think it could develop, and are you ready for both? I think I will leave you with that. and open up for any questions.
Thank you, Daria. I will just put you up here on the screen. Thank you for a great presentation. So this was indeed some methodology that can be used also in your businesses. Is this a methodology that has been developed by the Institute for Future Studies, or how? What about the scenario planning? Where does it come from?
Well, I don't think we can claim to have invented scenario planning, but we use it extensively. And it's just one way of assessing the future, but I think it forces you to acknowledge the actual drivers, admit your vulnerabilities, and then plan for them accordingly. Because we can do many things, but we cannot wish away the megatrends, and we cannot wish for them to collide in a certain way. So sometimes I think the scenarios are a very useful tool in imagining 4 distinctly different futures, and forcing your organization and yourself to imagine what would you do if you're in one of them. Because we often plan towards the one we like the most. And there's usually, 4 is also a simplification. There's continuous amount of trends and scenarios, but this is just 4. So if you're not ready for 4, you're certainly not ready for the future.
That's right. We tend to do what we hope to will happen. I was at the Summer Business Networking we held a couple of weeks ago. We had a speaker from Aalborg University called Rikke Christine Nielsen, and she's as an associate professor in paradox leadership. And she explained that the paradox leadership, which is a little bit related to this, is that like Mette Frederiksen, she had to decide whether she wanted to save the economy or save the health of the population. So that was a paradox. And that's the same paradox you also have in your leadership and in your strategy. Can you relate to that?
No, absolutely. I think part of it is also being transparent, and especially in a company. So you mentioned the Prime Minister. It is a balancing act, but when you choose a strategy, you're pursuing some sort of goal. And even if you may not share it widely with an organization, you have to be, at least with yourself, you have to be honest as to what that goal is and how far you're willing to go, because the environment around you may be changing. And at some point, it may be either a costly exercise or it may be the wrong goal, and you have to revisit it. But it's extremely important to be clear about what is it you're trying to achieve, because otherwise you have no way of knowing if you're doing the right thing. It's about, it's like being if you're wanting to lose weight, you're either going to be on a diet or you're going to do sports, you're going to do both, but in the end, you're going to have to know what the goal is, and then you can tweak accordingly.
Very, very good explanation. This is also why we have addressed this scenario planning in this tidbit today, and we will have this paradox leadership, because what's better than at a huge crisis that we have just been into, that to rethink all your strategy and your leadership and how is your office organized and all these things. It's a perfect moment right now to define where you're heading, because before the pandemic, we were just, going straight ahead on the highway. But I think it has made us think a little bit about where we're going next, because things will not be as they used to be. I believe you agree on that.
Sure. I just had a call previous to this where I heard someone from a senior strategy position say, well, you know what, things tend to go back to normal, so this time they will as well. And as an individual, you can have that opinion. I think also the gentleman was right that many things do go back to normal. How many times do we say the world is different after 9/11 or after the financial crisis? And many things do revert to normal. But if you are in a strategy position somewhere, or if you're in a business leadership position, you owe it to yourself to look at what will actually be different. So even if it's just working from home, well, working from home means less office space. Less office space means lower cost. It also means potential damage to the real estate market. Well, guess where your pension is invested? It's likely in the corporate real estate market. Where are you going to live if you commute less? What does it mean for suburban real estate prices there, etc.? So even every single change has a ripple effect. So yes, many things will go back to normal, but telling me that it's all going to go back to normal means you're missing an opportunity to spot the risks or harvest any changes that could go your way. So I think we owe it to ourselves to look at the actual things that will be different, and some will definitely be.
I can tell you, after you told me about this with the real estate market, and that the offices would be smaller and therefore our pension would be smaller as well. A couple of hours later, I spoke with one of our members, and he was saying, yes, but we have now decided that all our employees, they should work from home some days. That means that we will have a 20% reduction of our offices. And I was like, hey, it's coming. And that was
Exactly.
a couple of hours after I spoke with you about the pension matter there. That's very interesting. This is like a little bit like a value chain. Things you don't think that it has anything that you are now working from home. That's very comfortable. That has anything to do with your pension. That's okay. Yeah, of course. By the end of the day.
No, exactly.
Dasha, the Institute has just given out a new report about the pandemics, and I'm I'm just putting up the link because you have made it available to everyone, because you think it's very important report to everyone to consider. So the link is over here in the chat. So do download it. Will you give a few words about the report, Dasha? What is it about? Why is it useful for people? And why did you give it for free? Usually the reports are by payment if you are a member of the Institute for Future Studies.
Well, I think to start with the last question, for one, our entire vision and raison d'etre is for betterment of society. So we felt if there was ever a report we would make fully public, it would be this one, because this is something that is impacting everybody globally. Now, the report itself, it's a series, we do for a year, and so we choose the topics based on what we believe is relevant. And we believe, of course, the pandemic is relevant, but we also try to focus on a historic path of pandemics, what they have meant. So not just what we're seeing now, it's not just a health issue. So the Spanish flu gave us the WHO, etc. So we're looking at pandemics as changes, as catalysts for change in society at large. So again, back to some things will go back to normal, but some things will not. So we take a historic view back, we look at the future of pandemics, we look at what happened today and what does it mean and how could this pan out in terms of ripple effects as well. So we take a historic approach, and yet we look into the future saying this could change things significantly. So it's a series of different articles, so you can read it in bits and pieces as you wish. So and there's also a webinar out there. So we presented the report. I believe the webinar is also public. So I highly recommend it. Also, if you just read here and there and leave it for a while and then take it back up. So it's a very nice retrospect, but also look into the future of pandemics have come to stay and what will they mean for society going forward.
It's good reading for the beach. Well, MDC is a member of the Institute for Future Studies, and we get the Scenario magazine and the reports. And I remember the first time I saw these magazines, I thought, well, this will be very nerdy. It might be too difficult for me to understand, but I can really, really highly recommend it. I'm really a huge fan of the Institute and the publications because it gives you so much insight and so much to reflect over. So I can highly recommend all of you to follow the Institute at LinkedIn, and also look to their webpage and see what they have for you. So do give it a chance to read this free report. Well, Dasha, we have come to an end. I think you have delivered a lot of reflections to the people. They didn't have any questions for you, so
no, I can see.
No questions.
It's either clear or overwhelming. It's usually the two.
Yeah. Very often when the tidbits, they have a lot of information, then it's people, they are really overwhelmed and they will not come up with any questions. So I thank you so much for sharing your lunch and your knowledge with us. And to all of you, this tidbit will, as all the other tidbits, be made available in a replay version. So we will send you the link afterwards, and we will also put the contact info for Dasha. So if you have some questions to her or the work or how to do a future scenario, please do reach out to Dasha. And I can also highly recommend, of course, to follow the Institute at LinkedIn. I'll put all the links, so you just have to click and go. It will be the easy version. So thank you for joining us today for lunch. See you tomorrow, where we are going to have Christopher Rex, who is the head of analysis at Skibskredit. So there you will have a nice market insight to the shipping market analysis world with Christopher Rex. And that will be the last tidbit before we are heading for some tidbit holidays. Thank you so much, Daria, for joining us today. And thank you, everyone, for sharing your lunch with us. Bye.
My pleasure. Bye.